Hi all, welcome back to the channel. So today we have a very nice tutorial that's been started here by MongoDB themselves, and it's how to do a semantic search. And semantic search is when you want to find information in something like a clusterdb or a RAG type information for AI using numeric values. So if you can like and subscribe to MongoDB, they have some very good tutorials. But for ourselves, basically what we'll do here is I've set up a project and I've taken their kind of code base from GitHub as a starter point, but I've modified various kind of aspects to it, like I've kind of done in the other projects. So um, I'm going to upload these kind of notes later on. As you can sort of see, the notes are quite detailed on how to actually kind of run every single file, and if I kind of came across any issues. Um, but the kind of main point is that I'm going to kind of bring you over to a to our PDF here, and what we're going to be looking at today is this semantic search here. So if I kind of just move this over a little bit. So if I basically sort of say this is the semantic search with LangChain and MongoDB, what's basically going to happen is we're going to set up a Python virtual environment here, and we're going to use a vectorized MongoDB file here to load, transform, embed, and store. So it's going to basically, the vector MongoDB is going to do all of these kind of 4 steps together. And you can kind of break these steps out if you really want it, but the tutorial kind of does them like that. So we're going to kind of keep them like that. There's also going to be an open AI embedding model used to embed the actual information. And then where we're actually going to kind of change this from kind of previous examples is where we're going to actually use a MongoDB. So if you haven't used the MongoDB, it's a NoSQL type database, which basically stores documents. So it stores kind of documents into collections, and you can have multiple collections, and you can have multiple documents inside those multiple collections. So it's really good. And for AI, it kind of gives us a tiny bit of a different flexibility on how we can actually store information for retrieval later on, because we can use an embedding model here to write the information to MongoDB and kind of pull it back then using the same AI model. One kind of small information here is if you use an AI model here of a certain type to embed, you should use the same one for kind of pulling back from MongoDB. And then we can actually have like a Streamlit application here that'll basically kind of, return the information. And here, we can also have a kind of AI model, which is basically kind of being used to retrieve the information. So I've also kind of added a few new kind of documents here, testing the MongoDB connection, deleting the MongoDB documents, and checking the MongoDB documents. So these are kind of handy kind of utility tools that are kind of created just quite quickly. One, as I sort of says, to kind of check the MongoDB database. Why is that kind of important? It's important because if you actually look back at, your your setup, when you basically set up your MongoDB in Atlas here, you can sort of see that I actually have a cluster here that's already running. Um, you can sort of see when it's up the size of the files, the actual replica set here, if you really want to connect to it, the Atlas search here. If you don't know about MongoDB, it's one of those items where a few hours of studying MongoDB and how to use it, because it's generally kind of JSON based, but how to use it, and how to write to it, how to read from it, all of those types of things, and clustering then kind of into the MongoDB, and creating your first cluster and creating your vector search and all these types of things here. So I've kind of done all of these kind of steps here, so you can sort of see that in my in my MongoDB, I actually have one kind of cluster that's green, that's running right now. You can sort of see everything's kind of active. Um, and I actually have a collection here, and I have an index here on that collection. You can sort of see in the documents here I have like 324 documents, which is what the actual chunks were. So what happened was, if we kind of go back to our PDF here, what actually happened was, what we use LangChain to actually kind of split the documents, like the larger wiki pages into various chunks, and basically the way it divided it divided it into 324 documents. So those documents we could then basically use, for writing to MongoDB. So that's how it kind of fits together. I'm going to kind of run a few of those kind of commands now and kind of, show you. But if you don't know, about MongoDB, it's certainly worth spending a little bit of kind of time on. So I'm going to bring you over to this one here. And basically you can sort of see that I'm again kind of in my downloads folder, and I'm just having like, a virtual environment here that I've kind of, set up here. So the first file that we kind of, were testing here was like, the test MongoDB connection. So this is basically just so this tell me that the connection from my laptop over to the MongoDB cluster is successful. You can research, how to kind of set the kind of connection, and how to do a test kind of connection and everything to make sure that's actually running. Because what happens is when you actually set up your MongoDB cluster, you basically get a string, and then you're authenticating to that string. So you basically put that string into your test file, and then you can kind of connect to it. I kind of have, the same as the kind of sample, and if you follow the sample from MongoDB, you'll sort of see that they actually have a params file, and you just kind of replace in the params file, you replace the necessary strings with, your OpenDB, your OpenAI, and your MongoDB kind of types connection. So all of that kind of sort of stuff. Um, Here you can sort of see we're doing a check MongoDB document. So, this was something I kind of created because I wanted to make sure that, once it kind of connected to the MongoDB, that I actually had a database, that I actually had a collection, and you can sort of see this collection here, and there's exactly 324 documents inside of my collection. So that's all kind of good. Like I sort of said, if you really wanted to kind of, remove, you could also run this delete MongoDB documents. And again, you wouldn't be doing this in production, but it's just a kind of simple way to actually verify, that you can write to your database cluster, which is your MongoDB, and then you can kind of delete the documents as well. Because really what's going to happen here is when you run your vectorize file here, it's going to populate the MongoDB with the all of the documents. And then finally, what you can actually kind of do here is you can actually kind of query against it. So, you know, when you when you look back at the actual, MongoDB didn't kind of spell this out. They didn't kind of, create this document. I created this kind of diagram, and I've created all these kind of diagrams because I like to kind of find out exactly what kind of each single step is actually happening. And if you haven't seen these kind of, the previous videos, maybe kind of go back and have a look. And every week we're kind of building on our skills here, but you can sort of see that, every kind of step here is being kind of laid out, and that's kind of important as well, that kind of, for our own learning, that we understand. But if I kind of go back here, I could actually kind of sort of say, I can query here, because there's actually what the vectorized file has actually done is it's taken an AT&T and a Bank of America Wikipedias as sources, and it's load them into LangChain, and it's actually chunked them, and then it's basically written them over to MongoDB. So any information that's in this, AT&T and Bank of America Wikipedias, we should be able to query. And this is exactly what kind of happens here with your kind of, your number 5 here, which is a query to search, which sort of says, simple query to sort of say who started AT&T. So, the program itself returns back, your question, and then it actually returns back your query response. So I've added little kind of, debugging items here to sort of say, well, the actual number of retrieved documents here, and then the kind of information here. It just kind of helps me make sure that, what's the query that's actually, OpenAI is kind of bringing back to me. It just kind of helps me kind of understand that better. But you can also sort of see here that there's an actual kind of AI type response here, and it's what it does is it kind of takes, the actual original chunks data and kind of passes it into OpenAI, and OpenAI actually kind of then summarizes that information for us. So, at the end of the day, what you sort of see is your question versus, the OpenAI response. So That's exactly how it's kind of working. That's exactly how it's kind of fitting together. And then I kind of think the last thing was, we actually had like, um, a Streamlit type application that we've sort of seen, a few times now. But there's a Streamlit front end to this that you can also kind of run, and make sure that everything's kind of working from the UI. So that's how it all kind of fits together, and it was a really kind of good um, tutorial because it's something. MongoDB is something that you kind of probably maybe don't touch every single day. So it's a good kind of reminder of what kind of MongoDB does, the power of it, how it actually all kind of fits together, and how you can actually kind of use it in an AI application. Would you do this in production? I'm not sure. It does feel like a viable solution that you could actually kind of use this in production, because MongoDB, has clustering, has replications, has, failover. So it has an awful lot of information and infrastructure already kind of built into it. Plus you can kind of query your documents in MongoDB, which is kind of really, really cool. So, you could, kind of query what's actually kind of there in the database. You can fail over, you can create replicas and fallbacks. So all of that is kind of built into MongoDB. So it's a positive tool, probably, to sort of say, well, it's another kind of solution, and it's another option to the way we've kind of been writing, to using like versus using Chroma or anything else that's kind of available on the market. So hope you enjoyed this one, and this was a good tutorial. Thank you.